Welcome to a Homestar Pacetti Realty Network, Mastering Real Estate training event.
And just to finish up the building of the file, if you make sure that you've entered all the activity, all the events, all the information in chronological order in the file, it'll help take you to the closing, okay? Because you'll know exactly where you're at and what you've done. And also what that does is it allows you to have something ready reference about that property when you sit down and write your or call your seller with your regular scheduled communication about what's going on with the property, okay? And if you can give them specifics, not, oh, it showed, I think, probably, you know, that kind of vague stuff. They want to know specifics. They want to know you're working, okay? And that is where your future business will come from, okay? Jennifer has some customers and some clients that they rotate properties through her all the time, okay? Buying and selling and, you know, I mean, it's fabulous. That's how you build up your clientele. So keep good records, okay? Property repairs and maintenance, this is another part of the marketing thing, okay? There are going to sometimes be things that you will notice that the seller who's living there is not even going to be paying attention to, okay? Because they're, you know, it's like you see something but you don't when you see it all the time. So I heard somebody say, ask them to look at their house as if they were a potential buyer seeing it for the first time. You know, it makes them look at it with fresh eyes, right? And you know, there's all kinds of tricks and, you know, staging, I think Jennifer calls it, Jennifer and Linda call it, about the way to show a house. And it needs to be neat and clean and fresh smelling and easy to show. It makes it easy to sell, and you'll get to a closing faster. Somebody asked at one of the breaks about why in the world do I need a hammer? Well, sometimes you will see things like torn screens or a little piece of trim that's loose, you know, just, you know, you may be there handy with a hammer when the guy says, I can't find my hammer anywhere. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just stuff like that. Just kind of pay attention to it and guide them, again, kindly, gently, respectfully, but make them think about what's the best way to be able to show their house. And even when it's a rental property, okay, if there's tenants in there, those tenants have got to be able to let that house be shown. And you'll hear all kinds of stories. In fact, I've read some of the worst ones I've ever heard of happened right around this area. People made appointments to go show property, walked in on people, you know, I mean, it's just, you know, but that's that happens. It's funny after the fact, but not when it's going on and you've got customers and, you know. Okay, the yard should be kept mowed, shrubs, you know, trimmed up, all that, clean, neat, you know, looking good, okay? And the curb appeal, you know, when you're driving up to the house is just, you know, that makes all the difference. Okay, so you've marketed the property and somebody brings in a contract, okay? Contracts usually involve a binder deposit, and the binder deposit, Jennifer talks more in depth about these things when she goes over this next session coming. But the processes in this office, all of the escrow checks, the binder checks on contracts, go to corporate office, okay? And they go into one escrow account because Edith does the accounting for Chuck and for the state on the escrow account. The escrow account is a trust account. That is not our money. You guys were taught that in real estate school, and you'll learn more about that with your board's contract classes and all the legalities. But I can't tell you how important it is for that money to go immediately. There's been conversation about it could be 3 days or whatever, unless it says so in the contract that that binder will be delivered within so many days, and it says that of agreement or whatever the time is. That check has to go with a copy of that contract with this commission checklist immediately to Edith, okay? Now, some of the managers have deposit books because our escrow account is in Bank of America, and it's everywhere. We've had an account there for, I can't tell you how many years, when it was Barnett Bank, which we still call it Barnett Bank, actually. But Edith has to do for the state and for Chuck a monthly accounting to balance out that escrow account. And if there is a contract come in and it says, and I have caught this when I've done my weekly reports for Terry here, there is a place here where it says where the escrow check is. Now, if you're co-broking, that check is, it's their seller, I mean their lister, excuse me, their buyer, okay? They will probably have it either at a title company or in their escrow account. Okay, but some of these real estate brokers don't want the liability of an escrow account, so sometimes they'll give it to us to hold. But we got to know who it is that's holding that binder, because when you come to closing and it says on that contract that there is so much in escrow, that goes toward the final count of the money at the closing, right? So again, it's not our money, we're holding it in trust, and it has to be accounted for all the time. And if we see that we're supposed to have an escrow check and we don't, and the time is out, and they go back and say, well, we're going to write a new contract on a different property or whatever, we can't do that, okay? The times have to match, okay, of when the deposit goes into the account and what the contract says. And if you're too far out, when the DPR comes in and does audits, which they are liable to do at the drop of a hat without notice, and it is their right to check up on you, then you have to be able to say, I have the money, and if I don't, this is why. Okay? So, I don't know if they still do this or not, but they used to issue a newsletter from out of the state licensing department about who it was that got pulled licenses and why. And a lot of it, most of it, was for escrow mishandling, okay? People either didn't understand or they just were totally larcenous, whichever, okay? Is that a word? Yeah, I don't know. Okay, checks or money orders are to be made payable to Homestar Pacetti Realty Network escrow account. And if they can't fit all of that on there, then part of it or something, okay? And then mark on the bottom of the check what the property address is. Okay, and that, I mean, even if I see one come in attached to a contract and it doesn't have it on there, I write it on the check. That's not altering the check, but that's just making the notation, okay? And then make a copy of the check and put it in the file so that it's always there, and then send all of that over to Edith with the commission checklist, okay? Then from that, we compile our weekly reports, then we know what we've got pending. We know what your activity is, and we know how we're going to pay the bills. So, all very interesting stuff, you know, money. If it's cash, the buyer needs to have a cash receipt, and we have cash receipt books duplicating cash receipts, and give them a copy of their cash receipt, and again put the receipt in the file, a copy of it in the file, okay? Money orders, the same thing. And some people will ask for a receipt for the check, okay? Which, I mean, if they want that, that's fine. And actually, I think the contract form is actually a receipt for the money, but anyway, we always do it double. The contract is actually an offer. I guess you guys know this. We used to have sessions on this one. It becomes a contract when all the terms and conditions are met and everybody has agreed to it and signed off on whatever that last issue was. And it's dated. And if you look on your form, you'll see where it has places for dates. That's why I say fill in all the blanks. Then there's no question and no ambiguity, okay? I've got stuff on my list that I had to hand back to Edith from my work last night that had no final signatures on it, okay? And it was being called a contract, and it's not done yet from what I'm looking at. So you guys need to be real, you know, aware of that, okay? I mean, it's not until everybody's signed their name, right? Okay, and then when that happens, you need to go straight into your multiple listing if it's your listing and enter it as pending. Okay, and then notify everybody that it is. You know, if you need to send a memo or talk about it in the sales meetings, you know, I mean, you guys can do that. That's how we used to exchange all our information. Email's a good way to do it too. And if you go into your multiple listing every day, you will see everything that's going on, you know. The contract contains times certain that have to be complied with in order to maintain the integrity of the contract. If it says in there that you are going to supply the buyer with a copy of the title insurance by a certain day, you better do it, okay? Because all that has to do with whether or not it's a contract. And if any of those times go out, you either need a signed extension in the file agreeing to that extension, or you don't have a contract and you're endangering your deal, okay? If a contract is, and there is a return of binder deposit that needs to be made, we need a request for cancellation and refund form signed and sent in to Edith for that to happen, okay? And at the same time, she needs to know where to mail the refund check to. So if you put that on there as well, you know, it'll help. Again, more information that you can give us, the better for everybody. Okay, financing. Financing is like a week's worth of whatever, but as you go further into the process, you're going to find all different kinds of things that happen with financing. There's FHA, there's VA, there's conventional, and various and assorted ways of doing conventionals. There's owner financing, there's lease options, there's, you name it, there it is, okay? And the very best thing that you can do is become associated with an excellent, experienced, creative, innovative mortgage broker like Terry Pacetti, who will help you and guide you and teach you into the kind of financing that you need to help your buyers and sellers with, okay? The place I live in right now is the very first subdivision that Terry ever did. It's a 1-acre lot development out north of town across from the airport in St. Augustine. It's beautiful. It's got big old oak trees. Reminds me of Africa, actually, which is why I love it. And when he was first selling property out there, they were writing, him and India were writing contracts on the hoods of cars, and he was taking cars and trucks and horses and, you know, all that kind of stuff as down payments and selling them on contracts for deed. You know what I'm talking about, contracts for deed? Okay. And when I first started working for him, there were still people from early 1970s that were still paying him on these contracts for deed. I mean, $50 a month, okay, to buy an acre of land. So as time went along, of course, you know, they started paying them off, and then he'd have to go in and sign a deed and da-da-da-da-da. It was great. And to this day, there are still people out there, living out there. They've since replaced their mobile home, or they've built a nice house, or they sold it for $200,000, which is what they're going for now, if you can believe that. And, you know, it's wonderful. He still owns 3 acres out there, by the way. He hasn't made up his mind to sell it yet. I keep telling him not to do it. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that, you know, when you get tied up with somebody that knows how to do all this, and we are associated with an excellent mortgage company. This man has been in business for a long time, and he does it all. He does FHA, VA, he knows all the ins and outs, and he is a mortgage banker, and he knows how to do all of this process, okay? And we're going to have people like that come in and teach us how to do this kind of financing and qualify people for it, okay? And there's no better education that you can get, and it will boost your sales right out the roof once you get a handle on this part of it, okay? Closings. Lenders and title companies will order or ask you to order such things as surveys, WDO inspections, repairs, and they will, once it gets into their hands to do the title insurance and they get set up to do the closing, they pretty much take over the deal, okay? And if there are any questions that they have, that's another reason why if you build your file completely incorrectly, you will be able to assist that process along like you wouldn't believe. Okay, that mortgage verification will help them get a payoff on a mortgage. If you have all the information about the buyer, the seller, you know, and you've done fill in the blanks stuff, so there's no ambiguity, that closing will go smoothly. Okay. If you have to hunt and peck and scratch around and try and find somebody that's moved away in the meantime between the process of the, you know, because people do move out of the house before closing, you know that? Okay. Then you're going to be in trouble. Okay. And it'll delay things, and you don't want to do that. Okay. That's another reason why, if you know who's entitled to the property and what the condition of the title is by looking at the deed ahead of time, you can start working on the process before it gets to the closing table. Okay? Like if it's in an estate and it has to be probated. Remember we talked about that briefly. The settlement statement that's issued by the closing agent needs to be reviewed with the buyer or the seller, whichever one is your customer. Okay? You need to go over that real carefully and match that up with whatever was agreed to in the contract. If the one or the other of them has agreed to pay something that's kind of out of the ordinary, but the title company didn't catch that, like in certain areas, like in St. Johns County, in our traditional way of writing contracts, the buyer buys the survey. In Jacksonville, Duval County, it's in Jacksonville the buyer buys it. Okay? See what I'm saying? So I mean the seller buys the survey. I said that backwards. You get what I mean? You have to pay attention that the closing statement that you get before the closing matches up with what everybody agreed to pay. Okay? And make sure that all the taxes are paid that are due, any assessments, any mortgage payoffs. Sometimes there's a second mortgage on it. Just make sure that everything is there that you know about. Again, that's another reason why if you build the file, you can head this off at the pass, because closings have fallen apart at the closing table or had to be delayed another couple of weeks because everything wasn't ready. Okay? So you can take care of a lot of that ahead of time. Everybody needs to be on time for the scheduled closing. I don't need to tell you guys that. You're, you know, good, courteous, respectful people. And make sure you take all the keys and garage door openers and anything else that belongs to the property to the closing for the buyer. You know, obviously they're going to change keys and all that kind of security stuff. But, you know, anything that they're buying, they need to, you know, have access to warranties and stuff. The listing agent, it is their responsibility to pick up and log in the yard signs, lock boxes, or anything else that belongs to the company, and then get them back to the office and accessible again. We used to have a manager that refused to pay commission checks until lock boxes and signs were turned in. Yeah, and if somebody threw them out, then he'd make you replace them. So we don't do that, but it's just a good idea, because that puts a closure to it. You see what I'm saying? I mean, then you know you've done everything. The file is marked closed, and the completed checklist, because you're going to be filling this out as you go through, and don't do a new one every time. Just make a copy and add 2 and send it to Edie every time. And then fill this out, finish filling this out, put the closing statement and the check and the file, and that will be the end of it. Okay? And the check and everything needs to go to Edie for dispersal. Okay? And then I recommend send out a just sold card to the neighborhood. You know, that's another. We had an agent that actually picked up 5 more listings from when she did this. I mean, it was like bam. All of a sudden they said, wow, she's really doing something. And there were 5 other different people now that gave her listings. So it works. Goal setting. It's very important that you figure out what you want this business to do for you, and then sit down and make a plan, and then work your plan. Okay? Very, very important. And the reasons why you're doing this and what you want it to do for you have got to be clearly identified. Okay? It helps give focus and direction to your activity. And some additional ideas that I would like to have you consider just very quickly as we wrap this part of it up. Identify all the locations of the drop boxes for the courier overnight services like DHL and UPS and FedEx. You never know when you're going to have to do a jam piece of paperwork transaction in hard copy, which a lot of people are asking for, original in blue ink on black form signatures again. Would you believe it? They're not taking faxes anymore so happily, okay? And to get those kinds of things back and forth, you need to know how to get that stuff out of here quickly. And in the rural areas, if it's post office, you know, figure out what their closing times are. Ours closes up early over here, okay? But at one point in time, I had identified the exact location of every FedEx, UPS, this was before DHL, and every telephone booth, this was before cell phones, in the entire St. Johns County and half of Duval, because I never knew where I was going to be, okay, and what I had to do from one time to the other, which is another reason why I got my notary, okay, because I never knew when I was going to be entrusted with a document that I had to go get signed in order to be able to effect a closing, okay. So that's another reason. Now mine has been grandfathered in because now you guys have to take classes to become notaries, but it is definitely worth it, okay, definitely. And again, the internet is a fabulous source of information about just about anything. And I have found Google or ask.com, either one of those, to be one of the easiest search engines. You can ask the question in my syntax. I put questions in there, you know, like, how do you find internet cafes in Venice, Italy? And it pulled up every single one there was. I mean, you know, so. And then find a computer guru. It doesn't have to be a $700 or whatever they charge these days hour consultant. Just find somebody who's a little bit more familiar that you can understand when they tell you point and click, okay? You know what I'm talking about? Not everybody who is a computer techie speaks my kind of where I can comprehend it. And you have got to find somebody, I think, that can buddy up with you, that can help you when you run into a problem and you need an answer like right now, okay? Like my computer screen went completely blank and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you can't find somebody at MLS Tech, okay? That kind of thing. But you can call up, well, no, I couldn't call my sister at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then just learn how to navigate and maintain your own computer, okay? There's a lot of things out there, and there are a lot of magazines on the bookshelves that teach people, regular people, not techies, how to just take care of their computer, like do regular disk cleanup, do defrags, do, you know, cleaning up the cookies and, you know, all that kind of stuff. You've got to do regular updates on your security. You know about all that. You got to keep some kind of an antivirus. You've got to keep some kind of a firewall up. Just learn how to do all that. I didn't know any of this stuff 5 years ago because I had no idea. But I was motivated to do it because I have an internet-based business here. And I needed to know how to help these guys keep all these computers running, okay? So if you take care of your computer, it's a tool, it'll take care of you, okay? And then you learn how to use email effectively. I have to. I don't check it but once every, never mind. And when using the office computer or someone else's computer, just remember some of the people in here in the company have their own personal computers sitting on their desks. Don't reset anything, okay? And there are ways to access your email remotely. You all know about those? Hotmail, mail2web.com, things like that, and you just put in your email address. It's free to you. It's a service provided so that you can access your email globally, actually, okay, and for free, okay? And once in a while you will come across someone that says, I would like to buy an investment piece of property. It's a residential piece of property, and they will ask you about property management policies in the company, whether or not you can handle it. You will need to speak with your broker, okay, about that, because property management is a totally different phase of the real estate business that has its own culture, its own regulations, and its own way of doing things, okay? And so just talk to your broker before you would even begin to agree to handle anybody else's property, okay? And then, of course, you guys know about the other income opportunities available in the company. And the other thing that Terry and Jennifer are going to get into later on is the government resales. Okay, you guys need to know that there are other opportunities out there, VA resales and what they call HUD resales, okay? And those are another source for you to be able to make additional income and make additional sales, Okay, so anyway, I hope this stuff has been helpful to you, and if you have any questions, we can talk about it, and this will be reviewed many times, so you can come and participate in it or take it again as many times as you want to. Thanks for your time.